Okay. So I'm welcoming Sophia this week for a soul chat. Haven't done a soul chat for a while. And yeah, I just want to introduce her briefly and then she can introduce herself. So Sophia is a specialist coach, embryologist, andrologist, chemist and biological chemist at IVF Coaching Clinic. And I've got some questions about that briefly, but would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So basically, I mean, I'm a scientist, and those are my areas of expertise. So I've worked in the fertility space for a very long time now. Yeah, and in that space, over 20 odd years, I've, got to talk to a lot of people. So it's really interesting working in that area of science, because a lot of the time you're stuck in the lab and you don't get to see people. So the fertility space is great because I got to talk to lots and lots of people, which for me was an amazing way to actually work, where you actually get to see, meet and chat to different people every day.
Yeah, quite diverse and keeps the variety good. I think it is nice when you can, do face-to-face and be in person. I think, some people aren't interested, they don't like it, but I think if you like it and you don't get to do it, that's not good. So I think it's awesome that you've got that whole mixed bag happening along that time period that you were doing it for in that way. So I've got a question. Now, I did look up andrologist, and that's all to do with like the man stuff, right?
Yeah. So the embryology is all to do with the egg and the embryos. So that's that side of things, collecting the eggs, putting the sperm and eggs together, embryos, embryo transfer, freezing, thawing, that sort of thing. That's all incorporated in embryology. And andrology is the sperm side of things. So that could be just a basic test, semen analysis to see what's going on. It could be freezing sperm. It could be exploratory, looking for sperm, preparing samples for fertility treatment. So yeah, both very separate sides, the female and the male side, essentially, of fertility. Yeah.
So getting feedback. You have your IVF fertility coaching service you provide. So I want to ask you, when did you start to recognize, maybe it was from the very beginning, but when did you start to really recognize there's a mind-body connection in terms of people possibly creating blocks with fertility enough for you to, want to go into coaching with this?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I think talking to people over the years, you get to have those sort of very intimate conversations. I mean, they're coming in for treatment. They're very vulnerable. Oftentimes, especially with a stimulated cycle, there's being a long lead up with, injections and blood tests and ultrasounds. So by the time they actually get to the stage where eggs are being collected and embryos are being created, they literally look as though they've been through the ringer, because it's been an incredibly long process with lots of hormones for the women as well. So their hormone levels are through the roof, and that literally you could see and read that trauma on their face, and the support that was available for them at that time. You'd have those conversations with people and they just weren't getting the level of support that they need. So they'd have their clinic appointment and then they'd go home, and that's when the wheels tend to fall off, when you're home and all these thoughts are racing through their head and they've got questions, and they didn't have anyone there to help, support, guide, answer, and basically be there for them. So there's a massive gap between the clinical side of things and the emotional requirements that no one's actually meeting. And these people, they're quite distressed, understandably so.
Yeah. Do you recall, or do you currently see a pattern of what is typical of the emotional blocks? you know, okay, so let's go into it a little bit. So there's mental and emotional. So definitely, you know, someone's not getting pregnant, there can be blocks there. There's always some block. And it can just be, I'm not getting pregnant is the block. But do you see a pattern of a theme where it keeps showing up often with people, what those blocks could be, or is it quite varied?
Look, to be honest, it's quite varied. And until you actually get in and talk to someone, you don't know what those issues are. And as you and I both know, working in this space, every single person has, you know, their own individual traumas that they experience in life. And trauma is, you know, such a widely used word. It's not just where you present to the emergency department and you need emergency surgery. There's that emotional and almost soul, spiritual like trauma that people experience over their life from childhood oftentimes. And until you actually get to talk to people and ask them specific questions, you can't know where that is. You know, people will talk to you and they'll blame you know, their ex-fiance or an ex-partner or, you know, whatever it might be for their mental state or some of the feelings that they've got at this point in time, but it's never that person. It's always much, much further back. Oftentimes they can recall it in childhood, but again, you know, the emotions that they experience and the blocks and things that they're having now have very little to do with the people around them. As you know, it's got nothing to do with the people around them. It's an experience that happened a long time ago, and they've never resolved that. So it does vary. There's always something. I've never spoken to anyone and haven't been able to pick up something where they've actually had, you know, a problem that wasn't resolved, a childhood event that they still feel really bad about. And then again, it will present, as it does, in their partner's behavior, or they'll be triggered by something their partner does, nothing to do with that person, always to do with something that happened a long time ago. But it's interesting when you do start those questions, because it is a very varied journey for every person. There's no story that is exactly the same. The consistent theme, though, is that there is always something. There's always a blockage there. It's just a matter of asking the right questions and finding it.
Yeah. Do you find most people are unconscious to the blockage? They're not aware of the emotion?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, when you start asking questions and the right questions, you'll actually elicit that response out of them, and almost to the point where they have that aha moment and think, oh my gosh, I really didn't think that had an impact on me when I was a child, you know, so long. And it does. And, you know, it's amazing to see that, and also a beautiful thing, because once you've actually identified where that root cause is, then it's easy enough to remove. But getting back to that first event is a really, really powerful experience. So, and that's, you know, when you see that happen with clients, especially when they're releasing things, and there's a physical response to releasing that, which is what I'm never stop being amazed at the fact that when people actually release things, they will have a physical response even in the process. You know, the coughing, you know, the tears is obviously the most common one, but it's never ceases to amaze me, the body's reaction to releasing that stuff, because we store it in our body. I mean, it's an absolute known fact. You get stressed, your shoulders, neck, you know, you have tension.
Yeah.
So we know we store these emotions in our body. That's undeniable. Everybody knows that because they feel it when they're stressed.
Yeah, and I think it amazes people how they sort of say, oh, I didn't really know that was, you know, really bothering me in my life. It's so unconscious, so buried, so deep, so in the past. But what I notice is that what I try to string together for them is it's not just way back in the past. It's been rearing its ugly head, pops up, and then it goes away in the form of an event or someone. And then it's like I show them the string of events of that running theme, and it's like, oh, then they start to become very conscious, and you see that penny drop, and it's all of a sudden they feel quite empowered. And it's like you say, And I absolutely agree. There's this physiological response. You know, if we're feeling stressed all the time, you can literally probably take a blood cell, and you've probably done this, and you can put it under a microscope, and you could see that it's, or take blood, for example, to run tests, and you can see that if someone's highly stressed, it's going to affect their blood. They are going to become more acidic, which is going to affect, so the way you think and the way you feel, it affects your whole well-being, your whole body, down to your cells.
Yeah. And we were talking about that. I literally was talking about that on the weekend, that it really is, you know, there's a scientific explanation for all of these things, you know, whereas people will think, oh, you know, that's too far outside. It's just outside of your awareness and your consciousness. It's not even that far away. However, because people aren't hearing it often enough, they don't realize that every time you have an emotion, I mean, you can put the electrodes on your head, you can see the neurons, you know, light up, fire off, and you can see that sort of fire rewiring thing going through the brain. And with that, there is a biochemical response as well. So this is pure science. This is, you know, something that we can see, we can identify, we can light it up on a screen and show you when you have this emotion, look at the areas that light up in your brain. The really interesting thing is that we also have receptors for hormones on our brains as well. So you can imagine like a woman actually going through a stimulated cycle with all these injections and the hormone levels that are up through the roof. You can imagine, just imagine what's going on with their behavior. And a lot of the time they're not even conscious of this behavior. If you were to ask their family, friends, work colleagues, they might actually identify changes, but there's so many receptors for hormones on the brain as well. So absolutely, you know, how you're feeling, even as you cycle regularly for women through your hormone cycle, as your hormones are fluctuating, it is impacting your mood and how you behave quite naturally because you've got those receptors on your brain. So it's very interesting, you know, because there's a lot of science, you know, obviously in this space, but even when you look at the emotions and the behavior, there's a lot of science involved as well, and neuroscience. I mean, it was one of my favorite things to study, but it's so fascinating because you can actually prove to people, this is what happens. This is what happens when you feel love and joy, and this is what happens. Look what happens in your brain. And there's a biochemical reaction obviously going on within your body with the stress hormones, the cortisol, the adrenaline, and everything else. So it's fascinating when you actually look to see that, you know, everything we're talking about here can be proven, you know, in science, so you can see it on paper on the screen. If that's what you do.
Yeah, you can definitely track it. Yeah, we're definitely chemical factories. So much more than that, but there's so much factory going on inside that body, isn't there?
Yes, definitely.
So okay, there's a few things I'm jumping around here, but I'm just going to go with, you know, what's coming naturally to me. So, you know, there is the mind, body, soul, whatever you want to call that, spirit connection, and then you have, you know, being in the body. Diet is a major factor. You want to talk a bit about that for people?
Yeah. Look, and people sort of discount this, you know. I have conversations with a lot of people. I'm vegan. I've been vegan for a couple of years, and I, you know, follow a lot of different people, health professionals who sort of advocate this style of living. But I've actually been on the other end of the microscope looking at a blood sample. Now, you know, when I used to work in the laboratories, not only would I do the embryology, looking at the eggs and the embryos and the sperm, but I also used to do blood tests. And we'd spin down the blood sample that came in because we were testing for hormone levels. And when you would spin down certain blood samples and look at the serum, which is the fluid, the liquid that's in, and it contains all those cells and material, red blood cells, white blood cells, etc., you can tell when someone's had a very fatty breakfast. the serum is creamy. It's got a sort of almost like a buttery, creamy texture to it. It's a different color. And I would ask these people, you know, what did you, they tell me what they'd had for breakfast, and you'd be looking and you could tell, like you can definitely tell they'd had a fatty breakfast. And this is, look, this has been looked at by other people who have been advocating, you know, whole foods, plant-based diets, which are without a doubt the healthiest thing for you when you look at, you know, what's in these animal products. And then you start looking at the blood samples. So again, what you eat is absolutely essential to how your body functions. And look, everyone, you know, will do their own thing in terms of having a varied and balanced diet. They believe meat and dairy is important for them. However, you know, I guess it's up to the individual to have a look. What's your blood test like? You know, are you suffering with high blood pressure, cholesterol problems, you know, gout, you know, inflammation, which we know causes disease. And, you know, a lot of people have inflammatory diseases as well. And there's a whole range of those, and thyroid function issues. Again, a lot of this can be controlled by diet. And if you look at the Ayurveda techniques and the doctors that work there, a lot of them have traditional, you know, they're traditional doctors. They've gone off and got their, you know, degrees, and they are registered medical practitioners, but they also go off and study the Eastern philosophies. And, you know, they've had things like inflammatory diseases, and they've healed themselves by changing their diet. And the Ayurveda techniques look a lot at diet and how to modify your diet in order to improve your health. And it's fascinating because, you know, people are going to their doctors and then thinking, oh, maybe I'll try something else, and then changing their diet. All of a sudden the condition, whatever it was, Hashimoto's was the latest one that I was telling someone about. This doctor had it herself. She doesn't have it anymore. So, you know, and that's a thyroid inflammatory, you know, sort of disease that supposedly you have to be on medication for the rest of your life. Not. So, you know, diet has an amazing, and there's a really great book. I should have brought it up with me. It's called How Not to Die. It's a funny name for a book. But if you start looking at the sort of dietary recommendations, and there are blueberries on there on the list, linseed is on there as well, to have that daily for both men and women. It works well. But if you start to have a look at that book, and it has all the conditions and the dietary changes that you can make in order to completely, literally completely, for many people, reverse those conditions. And the good thing about that book is it's got all the studies at the back. So a lot of people, where's the peer-reviewed studies? And it has the studies that are listed in the back of this book. So, you know, if people want to go and have a look at the research, I mean, turmeric is fantastic. I was telling my sister-in-law about this recently. I said, you know, you have a quarter of a teaspoon of turmeric daily with a splash of black pepper to activate it. And I said, and trust me, it'll help with your inflammation.
Oh, cutting out again. It seems to be lagging. Oh.
She was able to run and hasn't had as many injuries in terms of, you know, feeling the effects of those various sporting injuries. So again, something as simple as that for inflammation is incredible. And that's in this book. There's a lot of other things you can take and include in your diet just to make, you know, things a little bit healthier for you. And I guess no matter where you are in your stage of life, being healthier is always a good option if there's little things that you can add to your daily diet to increase your health.
Yeah, and definitely I think, you know, diet will impact with, you know, with not all, because some people have horrendous diets and fall pregnant quite easily, but I think diet will play a major role in someone, you know, assisting them to fall pregnant if they're not. It's one factor, possible one factor. That's definitely something for people.
And they have done studies on that. They actually did a study in North America with sugary drinks. So they did a study looking at men and women who were trying to conceive, and cutting those who just had regularly, soft drinks and cordials and energy drinks and the like. And the ones that did, like, it literally increased their chances of getting pregnant. Those who were having these sugary drinks, they were decreasing their chances by 25 to 30%. So that's pretty incredible. And when you think about, and that was just looking at the sugary drinks, you think about how much sugar is in all the foods you eat, if you're eating processed foods, even the sauces and things like that. That's a pretty incredible study. Just cutting out the amount of sugar you eat will increase your chance of getting pregnant. Eat or drink, I might add, because you get it in the drinks as well. So
definitely,
that was an interesting study, directly correlating trying to get pregnant with sugar intake.
Yeah.
It impacts. It definitely does.
Yeah, I think that people think they don't realize how much sugar is in most things, and you can get it naturally. So there's a lot of sugar in a lot of processed foods, and I think people, and then they load up sugar on top of that, like physically put sugar in things. I don't think they realize how much sugar is in their diet. So I want to just jump to, keeping with time, I just want to jump to your successes with women falling pregnant.
Yeah.
Look, success story.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I've just finished recently working with a lady who had been and had a cycle, and a stimulated cycle, and realized when you get to that 2-week wait, that's when everything starts to fall apart, because you don't have the constant clinic visits and you're just waiting to see if you're pregnant or not. And for a lot of women, that's completely isolating, and the men too, because they feel the stress, very isolating time. And I sort of, for this particular client, guided her through, stayed with her for the 6 weeks, so right up to the lead of the, she was having a frozen embryo transfer, all the way past that 2-week wait. And we did some guided meditations around the time of transfer as well, which was pretty special. And she was pregnant. So that's just a recent story, and it's always a beautiful thing when people can have that successful outcome. You also are able to support people even if it's not successful, and help prepare them and give them some skills and techniques that they can use going into the next cycle. And another client I had last year had so many issues that I thought, this is definitely going to, both male and female, definitely going to a fertility clinic. And she ended up getting pregnant after she had the first visit at the clinic, and she was already pregnant. So look, it does work in terms of getting that support and having, a different kind of cycle. Because as you know, when you've got support and you've got someone working with you, a coach, that your outcome is always going to be completely different. And you've got that support team by your side for that journey, which absolutely makes a massive impact.
So my next question I want to ask you is, jumping into this being partly a soul chat, I want to ask Sophia, what does the soul mean to you? Soul, source, spirit, whatever you want to call it, God, what does it mean to you?
Well, that's the thing. People will call it different things. The soul is basically, for me, it's the essence of that person. Now, some people will call it a soul. Some people will call it spirit. There is a undeniable essence, I guess you could call it, of a person that can't be defined in the physical or necessarily the emotional sense. So for me, it's the essence of the core of who that person is. That's what that spirituality and soul means to me. Now, often people will find that soul or the spirit in other things. They will go to church and they will, be with other like-minded people, but that's inside them anyway. They will often look outside and look for support and encouragement and development. However, they already contain that within them. So it's a sort of faith Yeah, and an essence of a person is what I would describe that soul to people.
And, it's important that, there's things that we need to do to keep ourself aligned and feeling our flow. What do you do for yourself regularly to feel your alignment and to feel, feel good in life? What can you share with people?
Sure. Well, look, for me, every day I'm pretty much barefoot. So I'm not running around with shoes. I wear shoes to go out, but barefoot, which means when I go outside, I am actually connecting. Now, there's lots of information about grounding out there, but it's a really amazing, it's fantastic for your feet for a start to not be confined by shoes. And in the cold weather, I'll just wear socks. However, having that barefoot experience every day is a fantastic way to feel, grounded. The other thing that I do regularly is meditate. So that meditative state is a place where there are no thoughts. So you can literally switch that monkey mind off for a little bit and get into a nice, literally Zen, relaxed, no thought process state, which I think for the brain is really important considering how busy it is most of the time, even when we're asleep, maintaining bodily functions and heart beating, breath, etc. So it's a very busy organ. If you can actually give it that respite, I think meditation is a great way to do that. The other thing I do, and I do recommend to my clients, is I have the music. People must think I watch TV 24/7. I actually have the TV on with Spotify, and I listen to different frequencies of music, often 963 hertz. But yeah, just different frequencies of music. The solfeggio tunes will have the different levels. I have that on during the day when I'm working, and it keeps the whole house feeling very beautiful, and even keeps the puppy calm. So it's good for puppies and young children to keep them nice and calm. It's just beautiful music. And the gratitudes, I do gratitudes, write my sort of gratitudes every single day. It's usually at night before I go to bed. So when I go to sleep, I'm actually thinking of all the amazing things that happened that day, which is a powerful practice, as you know, because what you actually focus on, you draw more back into your life. So doing that every night before bed is one of my go-to things. Listening to the beautiful music, running around the house and dancing around the house with no shoes on is a daily practice for me as well. So those are a few of the things that I definitely do, and everyone can do them. They're very easy to do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, they're very similar to the things I do, very simple things, and it's just bringing it into your day and making it a daily practice. So where can people reach you, just in case people do want to reach out? I know you've got a podcast as well, so if you just want to share that with people before.
Yeah, sure. So my website is ivfcoachingclinic.com.au. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram, and all my contact details are on there. Book in a free call from the website directly. You just click a button and that will book in a call for people. I've also got the podcast, which is on iTunes, Spotify, what's the other one? Apple, I think. That's iTunes, isn't it? I never follow Apple. iTunes, Spotify. What's the other one? There's another platform, but it's on all the major platforms, and that's Let's Talk IVF, and that covers, I think it's over 50 episodes, but everything that you can possibly think of that might be involved with fertility, from acupuncture to grading embryos to, the things that will give you a better outcome in your cycle, your emotional support, all sorts of topics, and lots of guests and things on that show as well. So, and that's available on all the major podcasting platforms as well, called Let's Talk IVF.
Well, that's amazing. I will pop in links with this video as well. So thank you for sharing all of that wonderful information today.
You're very welcome.
Lovely catching up with you again. So anything you want to say before we go?
Keep doing your daily practices. If you don't have any practices to do daily, it's a good time to start, because any of those techniques to sort of bring you back into alignment and to sort of make your day a little lighter and brighter is an amazing thing to do. So I think, you know, if you can introduce a new practice into your day, it will have great benefits. Doesn't matter how small or how big it is, but any of those things we've mentioned are really good things for everyone to do.
Perfect. Okay, thanks for joining us, and we'll say goodbye for now. So, bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.